All right, so these are the tools that we'll go through, okay, for chapter A. So the learning objectives or the lesson outcomes will be these two objectives. Okay, so you hopefully will be able to elaborate on the tools that are used in QC and quality improvement, or QC and QI, and hopefully you'll also be able to illustrate the tools used in QC and QI. Right. So these are the objectives for chapter A. So as we have already seen there, that we have those 5 tools that organizations or companies use in their quality control and improvement. And again, there are many more tools that can be used, right? Depending on other references. And for these tools, the companies can either stick with just one tool if they feel that it suits their purpose, or they can combine any of these tools for improving and controlling the quality. It all depends on the needs and the capabilities of the various organizations. And these tools are continuously being updated, they are being improved, they are being enhanced, and we might have new tools or new approaches in the future that can be applied to quality control and quality improvement. So we'll start with the first one, which is creative problem solving. So of course we have to understand what exactly is a problem. So the concept of problem, one definition is that it refers to any deviation between what should be and what is. Okay, what should be and what is. And this deviation is important enough that it needs to be corrected, or it needs to be resolved. So this is what we call, or how we define as a problem. So in the context of companies or organizations, so when you say a deviation between what should be and what is, meaning that the gap or the difference between what should be, meaning what is there, what the objective is, what the target or the goal is of that company, and what is, meaning what is their actual situation or the actual result. So just to simply illustrate, we have the what should be in terms of, for example, manufacturing of a product. Okay, so they have a target, a goal in terms of what the product should be once it has been completed or once it has been manufactured. And the what is referring to the actual product when it has been manufactured. So a problem is when the actual product that has been manufactured deviates, it is different from what they had targeted. So this is a problem for a company that is producing that product. And same thing applies to companies that provide services. So they also have their goals or target in terms of what should be, okay, how they should provide the service to their customer, and then they look at how the service was actually given. So if the service given does not meet the target or the objective, then that is also a problem in terms of the service provided by the company. So these problems will be important because these are the core essence or the core business of the company. So the deviation is important for them to make the corrections or to resolve the problem. Right? So that's the concept of a problem. So you have these 3 elements of the problem. Okay, three different approaches. So you have the structured way of resolving a problem. For example, you just follow the instructions. Right? So you have a problem and you just follow the instructions. What do they tell you in terms of how to, for example, assemble a product? Okay, like I think all of us, we have bought either a shelf, okay, or a cupboard, or any product that we have purchased before that requires us to assemble or to install the product. So if you have any problems when it comes to assembling the product, then you refer to the manual, okay, the instructions in the manual to find out how to resolve the problem. Okay, so kalau nak pasang rak buku ke, so tiba-tiba dia lepas pasang, dia macam tak stabil. Okay, so that is a problem. It does not, the what is, the actual product after you have assembled the shelf does not match with the what should be. So that's a problem. So you try to resolve that or correct it by referring to the instructions or the manual. And usually the manuals, in most products, they have the section that gives the guidelines or tips in terms of what to do if you face any problems, okay, with the product. So this is what we call a structured approach to resolving the problem or solving the problem. Then you have the semi-structured, which is when you are facing a problem with a product, whether you are the company or even when you are a customer, you can use either a custom-made solution or a ready-made solution or both. So custom-made solutions, these are solutions that you have come up yourself. Okay, you improvise the solution. And the ready-made solutions will be the ones that are mentioned in the manual. Okay, so you can either use an improvised solution or you can use the ready-made instructions to solve the problem, or you can combine both. Okay, and hopefully that will help solve the problem. So this is what we call semi-structured. And the third one is ill-structured. Okay, the ill-structured meaning that the problem will be resolved using custom-made with the improvised solution or a non-routine solution, a solution that is not the common practice. Okay? In other words, you are inventing a solution, and hopefully that approach will be successful in solving the problem. Right, so these are the three approaches that normally are done when it comes to solving problems. So when it comes to creative problem solving, it refers to the activity associated with changing the state of what is to what should be in a new or novel way by using your creativity. So you try to resolve that deviation between what is the actual situation, the problem, to what should be, meaning your actual target, by using very unique and new ways. And these new ways, these unique ways of trying to solve the problem is based on the creativity. So in the context of companies or organizations, then you have groups, or you have these departments that will be focusing mainly on coming up with creative ways to solve problems that are faced by the company. Okay, so some companies have these different groups or units or departments, or what they call it, that try to find creative solutions to problems. So the strategy for creative problem solving is Okay, number one, the company has to understand the mess. So the mess here is, of course, the deviation between what should be and what is, meaning the problem. You have to understand the problem before you can actually make your strategy to find the solution. So understand the problem first. And then number two, you need to find the facts. Okay, just excuse me for 1 minute. Okay, sorry about that. So where were we? Okay, so finding facts, the second strategy for the creative problem solving. So once the company has understood the problem, so they find the facts in terms of the overall cause. Okay, what were the causes, or how did the problem arise? So they have to collect all this information, or they compile all the data regarding the problem they are facing with the product or service. Not sure if it's raining in your area, but here it's thunderstorms and so on. So hopefully you all can hear. Okay, so you find the facts or collect data and information regarding the problem. And then third strategy is identify the specific problem. Okay, the second strategy is to find the overall cause. And then thirdly, you identify the specific problem related to the product or service. So what exactly is the problem faced by that product? Is it due to defective, what do you call it? For example, if you're producing a car, is it the problem? Is it a dented or defective, what do you call it, gears, or is it a defective power windows or power steering? All right, so they find these specific problems that they are facing. And once they identify those specific problems faced by that product or service, or even any aspect of their company, then they start to generate the ideas. They start to brainstorm. They throw out all sorts of ideas, each of those involved in the CPS. They will, what do you call that? Contribute to the ideas in terms of how they can solve that particular problem. And then once they agree on an idea, they will develop that idea into the solution. So they plan how they are going to implement the solution when it comes to manufacturing the product, so that it will solve the problem, or how they can implement the idea into the services so that it can also resolve the problem. And once they have figured out how to apply the solution, then the final strategy is to actually implement the solution, okay, and in hopes that it will solve the problem. And obviously, once you implement a solution, so the company will then monitor, okay, the solution, and make sure that it, or to make sure whether or not the new solution had solved the problem that they had faced. If it did, then they will carry on. If the solution they had come up with did not solve the problem, then they'll go back, okay, and start over again and think of new ideas or other ideas to solve the problem. Okay, this is what you call the creative problem solving. Okay, next one is the sorry, the Deming cycle. Okay, the second tool. So the Deming cycle developed by Edward Deming. That's why it's called the Deming cycle. But he had what do you call that? He developed that, or his idea, from a previous statistician. Okay, so both of them are statisticians. Okay, so Deming had what do you call that? Developed or adopted and adapted the idea. Okay, from I can't remember his name. It was from yeah, I can't. I've already forgot his name. I already mentioned it to Prissy yesterday. Okay, but in any case, it was the one that is being used now by companies is the one what they call developed by Edward Deming. So this Deming cycle involves these four approaches or four cycles. Okay. It's known as the PDCA or the PDSA. Okay, so there are two variations. So you have the plan, do, the check, and act. That's for the PDCA. Okay, and the PDSA is, of course, plan, do, study, and act. And in the middle there, it's the customer satisfaction. So the Deming cycle, okay, this cycle of the plan, do, study, or check, and act will be centered around the or focused around the customer satisfaction, okay, as a way to guide their problem solving in terms of improving the quality of their product or service. So it's part of the Kaizen philosophy. It is to guide and motivate improvement activities. So that's probably you can apply this to any tool. Okay, it's to guide and improve or to motivate companies to improve themselves. Okay, so that's the person there. I forgot the name. So it was originally by Walter Shewhart. Right. So it was then renamed actually by the Japanese, okay, to the Deming cycle. Okay, after Edward Deming had made some adjustments or improvements to the Shewhart cycle. And the reason why we have the two variations, the PDSA or the PDCA, is that for Deming, he had changed the initial approach, which was the PDCA, the check, and changed it to study. And that's why we have the PDSA, the more, the more updated approach to the Deming cycle. So the idea was that study is more appropriate. Okay? So study is more in-depth, more detailed compared to check. Okay? When you say check, it's like macam kita cuma lihat sepintas lalu. Okay? And when you check, you might, as mentioned, they might miss some important details or might miss some information. So study is more thorough, and that's why Deming had preferred to use the PDSA. Okay, but still, some companies also use the check or the PDCA. Okay, but in any case, it's still the same approach in terms of improving, controlling and improving quality. So the plan here refers to recognizing an opportunity and plan the change. Okay, when you say recognize an opportunity, it means that the company will need to recognize the problem that they are facing or recognize an area that needs improvement. So whether it is a problem or whether it is an area of the company that needs improvement, these are opportunities. Okay, they are regarded as opportunities atau peluang untuk syarikat atau organisasi. Okay, kalau mereka ada kelemahan ataupun ada masalah atau ada apa-apa aspek yang perlu diperbaiki. And once they recognize an opportunity, then they will plan the change to resolve that particular opportunity. Okay, they plan in terms of whether to solve a problem or plan in terms of improving certain elements of their product or service and so on. So they will plan. And once they've come up with the plan, they will go the next cycle, which is the do, in which they implement or they test the change. Okay, they test the change, and then they do the next cycle, which is the check or study, meaning they will review the test and analyze the results. Okay, so after they do the or implement those changes that they had planned, then they will monitor. They monitor and view the results, whether or not the change had solved the problem or whether the change had improved the quality of the product or service. And from the analysis, they identify the learning. So they identify what they need to do. Okay, that's learning. They identify whether the change had was effective. Okay, they identify whether the change was effective or not. That's also part of the learning element of the check or study. And the fourth cycle is act. So they will take action based on what they had learned from the check or study cycle. Okay, they analyze the results and then they take action based on the analysis. So if the change was successful, meaning that it had improved the quality, then they will incorporate that into their process. Right? And if the change did not help improve the quality, then they will go through the cycle all over again. So they will go back to the planning stage. Okay, they think of a new plan, and then they will implement the new change, and then they will study or check the results and analyze the results, and they will act based on the analysis. So if the new change managed to improve the quality, then they will apply that into the process. Okay, if not, then they will go through again and again. So a cycle. That's why it's called cycle. It's repeated until they find a successful or an effective change that will help improve the quality of their product or service. Okay, so this is just other explanations on the cycles. Okay, so the plan, obviously you have the start and the finish. Okay, so the start will be the start of implementing the when do they plan to start the new change, and what is the target date for them to see the results of the new change, and so on. Right. So the plan also will describe the process. Okay, so of course it's a plan, so you have to describe in detail what will be done in terms of the new changes to improve the quality. Okay, what are the key tasks, the main tasks to be done? Okay, the sequences, the people involved, who is going to be involved in the new changes, okay, what equipment will be used, okay, the environmental conditions of the change, okay, any changes to the work methods, okay, will be changed as well, and what materials will be used. All these things have to be described in the plan. And then the players or the actors, meaning those who are going to be involved. Okay, you have internal and external. What you call customers and suppliers and process operators. So these are the ones who are usually going to be the ones that are the main players, especially the customers, because again, the quality improvement will be influenced by the customer satisfaction. So if the customers are not satisfied with the product, then that is when the company will carry out the Deming cycle. Okay, so they plan how they are going to improve the product so they can increase the customer satisfaction. Okay, and that's when they define the customer expectations. What do the customers want? Okay, what do they expect from the product or service? And they will also determine the historical data, okay, which is available on the process performance and so on. So they will also plan by looking back at any previous information or data on that product or service. So these are things that are done in the planning cycle. Okay, and then they also describe the perceived problem with the process. Okay, what would be the perceived problem, or what is the perceived problem that requires the improvement? Okay, is it the failure of the product or service to meet the customer's needs and expectations? Okay, is it excessive variation? Is there too much options or too many options, okay, for the customers that they cannot choose? As a result, they don't buy a product, for example. So they might have to look into that. Okay, identify what are the problems associated with the product or service. Okay, identify the primary causes of the problem. Okay, what are the main causes? Okay, and develop the potential changes or solutions. Okay, that's where they come up with the ideas, okay, to increase the improvement or to increase the quality of the product or service, and then they will select the most promising solution. So you have, as I mentioned just now, you have the ideas, you have different, they have the brainstorming, okay, and they will come up with different ideas, and then they will select the idea or solution that they feel is the most effective. Okay, and then the do would be to conduct a pilot study. Okay, again, they will do the test. They will implement the new solution, and they identify measures to understand how any changes or solutions will be successful or otherwise. Okay, so when they do the test, they test the new solutions to improve the quality. They need to find the appropriate measures, how to measure the solution. Okay, so you need to have the measures to quantify the data that will then be analyzed in the study and check cycle. Okay, so based on the results of the test, okay, based on the data they get from the measures, then they will determine whether the solution had improved the quality or not. And if necessary, if they're not satisfied with the current data, they might carry out additional experiments or tests of that solution. Okay, so you have the initial test, you get the data. So for example, they say that the first test of the solution had managed to improve the quality, but the management, they might not be satisfied. Okay, they want more solid evidence, so they might have to do additional tests of that solution. And if the additional tests come up with the same results, it managed to improve the quality, then that will be enough evidence that this solution will help improve quality, and then they will then act on it. Okay, they will apply or incorporate the new solution into the established processes. All right, so when they determine that the solution is successful, so they will develop the implementation plan. Okay, so they also have to plan in terms of what needs to be done, in terms of applying the solution, okay, who is going to be involved in implementing the solution, and when should the plan be accomplished. So a time frame when the new solution should be fully implemented into the process of that company. And once they apply the new solution, they have to standardize it. They have to standardize. So the example given there is by writing new SOPs for that particular process. Okay, because the previous SOP is no longer relevant because that SOP was involved in the situation where you had the lack of quality, okay, for the old SOP. So when you have the new solution that improves the quality, then you need to rewrite the SOPs according to that new solution. So that will be the guideline. in terms of how the employees will carry out their tasks, okay, whether it's to manufacture the products or whether it's to provide services to the customer. And for the act as well, you have to establish a process to monitor and control the process performance of the new solution. So even though the new solution had improved the quality, the company still needs to monitor, the progress, whether or not the new solution is consistently maintaining or improving the quality, or whether it improves quality, but after several months, the quality starts to decline again, and they will have to go back to the start of the cycle again. Okay, so you have to monitor, okay, the solution. So the key idea for the Deming cycle is that it focuses on short term and long term. Okay, so this is a benefit as well. It is beneficial for the short term of the company and the long term. The short term is that it helps with their continuous improvement. Okay, so they identify an area that needs improvement in terms of quality. They plan, okay, they implement the solution, okay, they check, and they act. So this is short term. It helps to uh, improve the quality in the short term. And in the long term, it helps with the organizational learning. So they're learning about their processes. They're learning more about their own products and services, what works, what doesn't work, what area needs to be improved, what doesn't need to be improved. This is all part of the learning process of an organization, and they will benefit from that knowledge. Okay, so this is the main ideas behind the Deming cycle. Okay, so we'll take a very short break, and then when we come back, we'll go into the third tool, sorry, the 7 quality control tools. Right. So we'll continue after this break. All right, so let's continue with the third tool for QC QI, which is the 7 tools compiled into this topic. So you have the flow chart, a run chart, and control chart. Okay, the check sheet, the histogram, Pareto diagram, cause and effect diagram, and scatter diagram. So we'll start with the flow chart. So for this tool, I think we're all familiar with the flow chart, whether you've used it before in any of your subjects or if you've seen these posted on the information board in any company or any organization. So the flow chart shows the different aspects of a company, which also helps them to identify the areas of or that needs to be improved on. So the flow chart is not necessarily just for the improvement of the product or service quality. It can be about improving the quality of the process that a company goes through. It can be manufacturing process or the process of the services itself, or any other aspect, even the hierarchy of a company, which is also represented by a flow chart. It can also identify any areas that need to be improved on. So for example, it shows unexpected complexity, meaning that are there any complex processes that the company did not expect to happen in the process of that company. Okay, so sometimes processes can be very complex, which causes problems and can affect the quality of the company. So by having a flow chart, it's basically a illustration or a visualization of the process, so they can see which of these processes is becoming complex, which can affect their productivity, it can affect their effectiveness, it can affect their quality and so on, so they can take action to resolve that complex part of their process. It can also help to identify any problem areas. If, for example, you have a situation like a bottleneck, you probably heard of this before. When you have a process that has this bottleneck problem, meaning that initially the process flows smoothly, but then when it reaches a certain stage, it becomes congested. It's sort of like simple analogy, like you're driving on a road. It's a three-lane road, and suddenly it narrows down to a one lane. So it's a bottleneck. It's very narrow. It's sempit, and that causes congestion. It can cause traffic jam and so on. So same thing applies to a process that you have in a company when initially the process is going very fast, very smoothly, but then it reaches a stage where it becomes jammed or congested because of that bottleneck process. So by having a flow chart, they can also identify that particular problem. Redundancy, meaning that they can identify any processes that are repeating. You have similar processes that are happening in the overall process. So these redundancies, again, they take time, or they waste time, they waste resources of the company. So they can reduce the redundancy when they look at the flowchart. Unnecessary loops. So now when the processes they go through different persons or different departments, they go all around, and eventually they come back to the original process flow. That also waste time and so on. So they can also avoid any unnecessary loops. Okay. And generally the flowchart also helps to make decisions on how to simplify the process that a company goes through. And again, it's not just for products and services, it can be for the administrative process, okay, the financial process as well. So all these things can be simplified, okay, by having this or referring to a flowchart. And it also helps to compare and contrast the actual process versus the ideal flow of a process. So it's similar to what was discussed in the creative problem solving, right? The what should be and what is. Okay? The what should be is the ideal flow of the process, and the actual flow of process is the what is, okay? The actual process flow. So they can compare, okay, by looking at the flow chart and comparing that with what they're actually doing. So if it doesn't match, then they can make the necessary adjustments. And it allows a team to reach agreement on the process steps and identify activities that may impact performance. Okay, so when you have a flow chart, again, it's an illustration, a visualization. So it helps those involved in designing, or what do you call, designing the process flow of that company, to agree on what are the proper steps in the process, because they can visualize everything in the illustration. They use the flowchart, they can all agree, okay, this particular process is a redundancy, a duplication, so we can get rid of it. And all the other members will also be in agreement, because they can see clearly that there is a duplication of process. And it also, as mentioned early on, it identifies activities that impact performance and quality, okay, the complexity, the problem areas, bottleneck, and so on. And flowchart is also useful as a training tool for the company, okay, especially when you have like new recruits or new employees, okay, and you want to train them in the company. You can evaluate their performance by referring to the flowchart. So is the new employee carrying out the task according to the process shown on the flowchart, or are they doing something that is going against the flowchart? Okay, and that way they can correct the new employee. Okay, they can advise them and improve their skills. Okay, eventually, they will start to do the task according to the proper process flow. So a flowchart, and again, we probably are already familiar with this. It's made up of these three symbols. Okay, so the elongated circles. So this refers to the start or the end of a process. Usually, it refers to both. Okay, when we have the start of a process and the end of a process, it usually is represented by these elongated circles. And then you have the rectangles, which shows instructions or actions taken in that process flow. And the diamond shape shows the decisions that must be made for that particular process. Okay, so you have the illustration here. So it says figure 1, part of an example flow chart showing how a route, or how to route incoming, or how to route incoming phone calls. Okay, so this can be, for example, the flowchart of a company's operator, okay, or it can also be the flowchart for, say, the customer service operator. Okay, so again, you have those elongated circles for the start and finish, and then you have the rectangles for the instructions. Okay, so instruction, obviously, answer phone. So if the phone's ringing, so of course the first instruction is to answer the phone. And then the diamond would be the decisions. Okay, so when they ask the caller, okay, when they answer the phone, they ask the caller, okay, how can we help? So it depends on the request, or it depends on the question asked by the caller. Okay, if they say that the customer or the caller wants to know more about the product info or how to help place an order, then that's when the operator has to decide, okay, whether which area they should redirect the caller to, or what other instructions the operator has to do. Okay, so if, for example, the caller wants to know about the product info, so the operator will then take the name and the company name. Okay, that's the instruction for the operator. Okay, whenever the caller asks for product info, first of all, you must always take the name and the company, and then the next instruction is to transfer to the sales department, and that's the end of their task. Okay? And if the caller asks for other requests, so they will also go through the same process. Okay? They have the instruction and then they make the decisions. Okay? If the call is regarding a problem faced by the caller, okay, so the decision or the caller is having a problem, so the next decision is depending on what problem they are facing. So if it's shipping, okay, so they will transfer to another area. If it's for billing, then the operator will then transfer to another section of the company. Okay? If it's a problem with the product, then the operator has to take the name and company and then transfer to the help desk, and then that's the end of their task. Okay? And this is all stated in the flowchart. Okay? So you can see there clearly what has to be done, all the instructions, all the decisions. Okay? There's no complexity here. There's no bottleneck. Okay? There's no redundancy and so on. So it's all clear and the process is flowing smoothly. Right. So the key idea behind the flowchart again helps identify the sequence of activities, okay, from start to finish, okay, what has to be done for the different activities or processes that they face. And it helps the people involved in the process to understand much better, okay, because it's in an illustration. So for most people, yeah, I think we all apply as well, that we understand something better when it is in this kind of visual form. Okay, when it is an illustration, we tend to understand things a bit better. Okay, and this helps with the improvement of the performance of the employees in the company. Okay, when they understand what to do, so it helps them perform their task more efficiently and more effectively. Okay, next is the run chart. So a run chart is a tool that monitors the performance of one or more processes over time to detect trends or shifts or cycles of that particular process or processes. Okay, it's more of a tool to monitor the performance, and from there they can take action in terms of how to improve the quality, okay, depending on the results of that chart. And the run chart also allows the team to compare performance before and after implementation of a solution to measure the impact of that solution. So in other words, the run chart can be used with the Deming cycle, or it can be used with the creative problem solving as well. Okay? So the problem solving or the CPS, okay, it also involves coming up with new solutions, and same thing with Deming cycle, as we have seen, it also involves implementing a new solution. So the company can use the run chart to compare the performance of, for example, the product or service before the solution was implemented and after the solution was implemented. So did the new solution help to improve the quality or not? That can be determined from this run chart. Yeah, and it focuses attention on truly vital changes in the process. So when they do the comparison, or when they just look at the chart itself, they can see any vital changes, any important, any drastic changes in the process or in the quality of the product or service. Okay, so this is the illustration for the run chart. So you usually have this graph, and you have a straight line, horizontal line, which represents the mean line. I mean, the mean here meaning the average line, okay, which indicates the average. What do you call that? The average measure. Okay, the average measure of whatever that they are analyzing. Okay, it can be time, it can be volume, it can be any variable that can be measured. Okay? So the average will be the mean line or the average, right? And then for this particular illustration, it's about the surgical prep on time. Okay? In other words, the time it takes to prepare for a surgical operation. So this would probably be, for doctors, okay, or surgeons in the hospital. So they can use the run chart to analyze, the prep time. Okay, how fast, how slow does it take for the doctors or surgeons to prepare for an operation? So you can see that, like for the month of June, and then February the following year, and then for July the following year, okay, the prep time was very fast. So only about 33 minutes. And then for the month of January, August, and then February the following year, the prep time took a bit longer, okay, about 41 minutes, okay, assuming it's minutes. Okay. So again, it's a visual indicator to show that, okay, so for these times, the surgical prep time was fast, but in other times, the surgical prep time was rather slow. And you can also see sort of a trend. Okay, so you have June, and then February, and then the following year, it skips a month, July. So from here, you can probably predict that for the following year, the prep time in March will be faster, because in that year, February, it was fast, 33 minutes. Okay, so probably next year, March will be faster. And then for January, it was slow, and then August, it was slow, and then the following year, February. So the skip from January, February pula, yeah, lama, and then probably in the next year, they can predict that September might be slower prep time. And based on all this analysis, then the hospital management can then take any action to try to prevent those months from having a slow prep time. So that's the benefit of having this run chart. Okay, you see that patterns or the shifts in the performance of this particular hospital. Okay, and same applies to any other company that when they measure any performance process in their organization. So the key idea for the run chart shows the performance and variations of the process. Okay, the performance, whether it's slow or fast, and the variations. So sometimes it's high, sometimes low, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, and so on. Right? So it becomes a good indicator in terms of the trends and changes in performance and quality. And they also identify process changes and trends over time. Okay? And it can also show the effects of the corrective action. So like, as mentioned just now, they can apply the solution, okay, or the creative problem solving solution as well. And then they can monitor them using the run chart and compare it with the previous chart before they had the solution and see whether or not those changes had improved the performance or the quality. Okay, so that's the run chart. And the other one, still in the second of the 7 tools, the control chart. So it is a run chart, basically, but with 2 additional horizontal lines called the control limit. Okay, so you have at the top the upper control limit, and the bottom is the lower control limit. So like the run chart, it also focuses on detecting and monitoring the process variations over time. And it also helps to distinguish between the special causes of variation from the common causes. And it's also a tool for ongoing quality control and provides common language for discussions on process performance. So it's basically just the same as a run chart, except for these 2 additional lines. Okay, so the illustration there for the control chart. Yeah, again, you still have that median value, the line in the middle there, which is the average value for whatever they are measuring in terms of the performance or the quality. And you still have those lines in the graph of the chart. And again, you have those 2 additional lines, the upper control limit and the lower control limit. So basically, the upper control limit is the uppermost limit or the uppermost acceptable limit to the performance measurement. And the lower control limit is, of course, the lowest acceptable control limit or measurement. So as you can see there in the chart, in number 3, so we just assume that this is the month. So in the 3rd month of March, the performance went below the lower control limit. Yeah, so it went below the acceptable or lowest acceptable measurement. And for July, okay, assuming that it's a month, so July, the performance exceeded the upper control limit. So based on that analysis, then again, companies or the management can try to identify the causes. So for the number 3 and 7, so these will be the special causes of that variation. Okay, so for other other points, it remains within that control limit. But only for the 3rd and 7th measurement, it went below or went above the control limit, and these are things that the management will try to identify in terms of these special causes. Okay, meaning those probably unique causes that resulted in the performance dipping below the control limit, or any specific causes that resulted in exceeding the upper control limit. Okay, and from there they can take the necessary steps. So this is the control chart. A third one is the check sheet. So this is basically a table, okay, dalam bentuk jadual, And the benefit of a check sheet is that it helps to create easy to understand data. Right? So if anyone in the company were to look at the check sheet, then they can understand what all those data means on the table. And it builds a clearer picture of the facts. Okay, so when it's easy to understand, it also builds a clearer picture. People will have a better idea about the facts of the process that is being measured, and from there they can determine whether there needs to be improvements to the quality or not. Right? And it also forces agreement on the definition of each condition or event of interest. Like the flowchart, it helps to ensure that those involved in analyzing the data will agree on each definition for the conditions that is being measured, because everything there is stated on the check sheet, so they cannot argue against it because the facts are there. Okay, they cannot give different definitions because everything is clearly stated on the check sheet. Right? So once everyone is they are all agreeing to the data, then they can take the necessary action. Okay? And in the check sheet, it also refers to the patterns established by the data that is keyed into the check sheet, so it becomes quickly obvious, meaning it becomes apparent. Okay? Everyone will know what the data means when they observe the check sheet table. So this is the illustration of the check sheet. In this case would be the pin diameter. Okay, the diameter of the pin that is manufactured by this particular company. So all the information is there, from the operator's name, the date, the cutter type that's been used to manufacture the pin. So you have the something similar to the control chart where you have those two lines. In this case, it's vertical lines. One is the lower specification limit, and the other one on the right is upper specification limit. Meaning these are for the lower spec limit, the lowest acceptable diameter for the pin. Okay, and you have the upper spec limit, meaning the top or the uppermost acceptable diameter for the pin. So anything below the lower spec would not be acceptable, and anything above the spec limit would also be unacceptable because they have to stay within the proper measurements of that product. Right? And you can see there again the data that has been indicated in the check sheet. So you have a few number or small number of pins that had been made, which the diameter falls below the lower spec limit. Okay, so there are two pins with 1.6 millimeter diameter, only one with 1.5 and only one with 1.3. So not many product pins had a diameter less than the lower spec limit, and you have six pins which had a diameter which exceeded the upper spec limit. Okay, and from the pins that are manufactured that stays within the spec limits, so you can see a pattern. That those that with 1.7 millimeters, it initially it's only a few number of pins, and it starts to increase until it reaches 2.2 millimeters, where you have the most number of pins, and it starts to gradually decrease in terms of the number of pins, but the diameter increases. Okay, but the amount declines. So you can see that the pattern, the triangular shape. Okay, so they can probably say that for this particular cutter, the machine that is used to manufacture the pin, okay, I think it's B32. Okay, so initially when they use that machine to make the pin, it initially starts with very small diameter below the spec limit, and as the machine starts to produce the pins, it stays within the spec limit, and most of it is in the 2.2 millimeter. And after that, the machine starts to produce uh, the pin with a much wider diameter, but the numbers start to decrease. So that's a pattern. Okay? And from there, the management or the supervisor or whoever it is, they can decide whether to take action, whether they need to improve the quality of the pin or improve the quality of the cutter used, and so on. Okay? And that's how they use the check sheet, okay, for quality control and quality improvement. Right, so the check sheets are special types of data collection forms, which results may be interpreted on the form directly without additional processing. Okay, so the form, the table, okay, borang yang digunakan untuk check sheet. So you don't need any other processing approach. You just look at the form, the table, the information is already there, and you can interpret the information on that check sheet. Okay, so that is a main idea of this tool. Okay, next is histogram. Okay, number 4. And again, probably we've already familiar. Okay, we are probably already familiar with histogram. We've come across it or even used it before. So this histogram is used to display large amounts of data that are difficult to interpret in tabular form. Okay, so for any measurements of performance that require huge number of data, then of course it's difficult to use a table. It's difficult to use a check sheet, for example, and therefore the best way is to use a histogram. Okay, so it helps to show the centering of the measurements, the variations of the performance or measurements, and the shape of the overall process or performance process. And it illustrates the underlying distribution of the data. Okay, and this is something that you have very common with histograms, with graphs or bar charts and so on, or bar graphs. Okay, it's about the distribution of data according to the specified measurements used by the company. And like all the other tools we've seen before, it also helps to provide information to help predict the future performance of whatever is being measured, whether it's a product or service, whether it is any other process in the company. And a histogram also helps to answer, is the process capable of meeting the requirements? So whatever is being measured, based on the results of the histogram, it can help the management or the company to determine whether the current process is able to meet the quality requirements or whether it's able to meet the customer requirements. Okay? So that can be determined by the histogram. Okay, so we have this illustration of the histograms, although they don't give any examples of situations or companies. Okay, and again for histogram, sometimes initially we get confused between histogram and the bar chart, right? So the histogram where the bars are, side by side, okay, and the bar chart usually the bars are separate from each other. Okay, so that's the difference, right? And for the histogram, it is also usually accompanied by this curved line. So the curved line also helps to show the pattern of the distribution of the data. Okay, so you can see that the uh, data or the volume or whatever the measurement is, it increases, okay, and then decrease slightly, but then shoots up drastically, and then goes down, and then it goes down drastically after number 11.5 and so on, and then it goes down again. Okay, so this is the distribution of the data based on the measurements, okay, that has been used for a process or any other analysis. So from the histogram, the company will then uh, identify whether this will happen again in the future, okay, to predict the performance of the process or the product based on histogram, and determine whether or not the product met the requirements, okay, whether quality requirements or customer requirements. All this will be determined by analyzing the histogram. Right. So that is the fourth tool. So this provides clues about the characteristics of the parent population from which the sample is taken. Okay, so histogram. So like many other of these graphic tools, whether it's the pie chart or the histogram, bar charts, so on, they are the measurements of a sample. So the analysis of the sample helps the company to identify or to determine the characteristics of the parent population. So if the sample, for example, was taken about the customer satisfaction, okay, so they take the data from, say, 1,000 customers. So this will provide some clue about the characteristics of the overall population of the company's customers. So if the sample indicates a downtrend in the customer uh, satisfaction, then this results in the overall satisfaction of the entire customer population. They will also be dissatisfied, or they will start to lose their customer satisfaction. Okay, and this is taken from that analysis of the sample. Okay, that's how they use the histogram. Yeah, and again, as mentioned now, it's something that companies can identify in terms of the pattern that a table or a check sheet cannot display, because of the amount of data that is being analyzed. Okay, the fifth tool is the Pareto diagram. So the Pareto distribution is one in which the characteristics are observed and ordered uh, from largest frequency to the smallest. So it is like a histogram, but for the Pareto diagram, the bars are ordered according to largest to smallest. Okay, dia akan disusun dari yang paling besar hingga yang paling kecil. And in the Pareto diagram, it has a line, okay, that runs across or above those bars. So these are the cumulative values of the defects. So the cumulative meaning the combination, the total values, the added totals or the added total values of any defects or any issues of the quality and so on that is being measured by the Pareto diagram. Okay, so for each bar, they will then add the values. Okay, so you could accumulate, okay, and this will be represented by the line. So basically, the Pareto diagram, okay, is again showing the distribution from the largest to smallest, and the distribution is based on the 80-20 rule. Okay, the 80-20 rule. So it's described in the next slide. So what is meant by the 80-20 rule or principle is it means that 80% of any quality issues, 80% of any quality issues or problems is resulted or are resulted from only 20% of major causes or major factors. So only 20% of the major factors will result in 80% of the quality issues. So they call it the major factors or the vital factors. And 20% of the quality issues are resulted from only or are resulted from 80% of the unimportant or the insignificant factors or minor factors. Okay, that's the 80-20 principle. So again, the 80% of the quality issues are the result of 20% of the major factors, and 20% of quality issues are the result of 80% of minor factors. So the focus of the company should be on those 20% major factors, okay, and they will try to resolve those major factors so that they can improve on the quality of the product or service or whatever is being evaluated. So the example given there, like for example, 80% of the sales, 80% of any issue that relates to the sale of a product comes from 20% of loyal customers. Okay, so if the 80% of the sales is having a problem, okay, if the sales of the 80% are declining, then that is due to the loyal customers not buying your products. And that is where the company will need to figure out how to resolve that issue so that those loyal customers will buy your products and that will maintain your 80% sales. All right, so that's how they will analyze using the Pareto diagram. So the benefits is to help the team focus on the causes that have the greatest impact. It displays the relative importance of problems in a simple visual format. So just a histogram from largest to smallest frequency, and you have the line to show the cumulative value of the problem or the defect, and prevents shifting the problem where the solution removes some causes but worsens others. So when you identify the 20% major factors that cause a problem, then the company can focus on that rather than focusing on the 80% minor problems, which might become worse if they focus on that rather than focusing on the major factors. So this is how the Pareto diagram helps the company. So the illustration there shows the situation where they are analyzing the paint non-conformities or the paint defects for 1 month, okay, for their product, which is a riding lawnmower. Okay, so a lawnmower you can ride on, you can drive the lawnmower, Okay, so of course it has to be painted, and they will measure the quality of the painting of the lawnmowers for 1 month. Okay, and they look at the deformities or the defects of the paint process. So you have there in the this the description there. So you have the list of uh, defects or non-conformities. Okay, so light spray, meaning that they don't spray enough paint. So there is patches. So some parts of the lawnmower has even coat of paint, others not as much paint. So you can see the difference. So this contributes the most defects, okay, for that 1 month of the paint process for the riding lawnmower. So 582 lawnmowers or 582 defects identified, and this contributes to 30.9% of the problem or the issue, right? And then you have the runs, meaning when the paint is terlalu cair, okay, the paint is not evenly or thick enough or too runny, then the paint will run. Yeah, and sometimes we can see that, when we paint something, the paint is too thin, okay, terlalu cair, then the paint will start to run down, and you have those nampak kesan lah, cat, okay, when it starts to run. So those lines at the bottom there, you have that glob of paint. So this is the second biggest contributor to the defects. Okay, and this amounts to 23% of the defects. And then drips. Okay, so when the drips, when the paint, so there's again too much paint, it tends to drip down, and it might affect other areas of the lawnmower. So we have the 12%, blisters. Okay, when you have the paints that sticking out, okay, when it dries out, okay, it's not evenly coated. So there are some paints that are sticking out, and they can become flaky and so on. Okay, 11.3% splatter. Okay, when paint is splattered all across the product. 7.5% bad paint, right? 6.7% overspray, so too much spray being used or too much paint, 5%, and others 2.6%. Okay, so the cumulative is indicated by that line or the curved line. Okay, so from there it's easy to identify what are the major causes of the defects. In this case, the light spray and the runs. So based on that data, they have collected and displayed through the Pareto diagram, so they can identify what are the what they call the major factors, and from there they can take necessary action. Okay, number 6, cause and effect diagram, also known as the fishbone diagram, and also known as the Ishikawa diagram. So as you can see there at the bottom, the illustration, it's sort of like a fishbone. So that's why they call it fishbone diagram. So this tool helps the company to focus on the content of the problem and not history of the problem or differing personal interests of the team members. So the cause and effect diagram or the fishbone diagram helps to focus on the contents of the problem. It gives them more focus on what are the causes that led to the effect, which is the problem that they need to rectify. So it creates a snapshot of collective knowledge and consensus of the team. So this builds support for solutions. See? So the fishbone is a collective a collection of the ideas and agreements within the team that is analyzing the issue that needs to be corrected or to improve on the quality. So each of the bones will represent the different ideas, right, that the team has identified in terms of the causes of the problem. Okay, so you have the illustration there. So the effect, meaning the area that they need to determine, or the problem they need to identify in terms of the causes, will be the defective panel. Okay, so they have produced or manufactured a panel, and in the end, it was defective. Okay, there are many defects on the panel they produced, so they had to determine what were the causes of the defective panel, and that's why I can use this fishbone diagram. So you have, in this case, 4 main causes in man, machine, material, and method. And within each cause, you have, or they identify the contributor to the cause. Okay, what contributed to the cause that led to the defective panel? Okay, so for example, we say the method. Okay, so one of the causes was the method they used to produce the panel. So they identify the method was that they used the wrong tool when producing the panel. So what contributed to the wrong tool was that the correct tool was not defined when they were manufacturing the panel. Okay, it was not clearly defined what tool should be used to produce the panel. So in the end, the workers, they used the wrong tool, and that contributed to the defective panel. So they know the cause, they know what contributed to the cause, and from there they can take the necessary corrective action. So after this, the company or the management, they will prepare guidelines, or they display on the assembly line what are the tools to be used, so that the workers will not use the wrong tool. So the problem is solved. Yeah, and that's how the fishbone diagram can help improve that quality of that process. And same thing apply to all the other causes that they identify, okay, whether it's the man, material, or the machine. Okay, so the cause and effect, or the fishbone diagram, is a simple graphical model, a method to present a chain of causes and effects. Okay, so you see the chain there of the man, machine, method, material, and to sort out the causes and organizing relationships. Okay, so you identify the cause, and you also identify the contributor to the cause. Okay, and this helps with that effort to find a solution to improve that process or to improve the quality. Okay, and the 7th tool is the scatter diagram. So the scatter diagram supplies the data to confirm a hypothesis that 2 variables are related. So a company wants to study whether there is any relationship between 2 variables, okay, with regards to any problem or defective product and so on. So they want to test whether these 2 variables are related. So in other words, the scatter diagram is a good follow-up to the fishbone diagram. Okay, so the fishbone diagram, you have those 2 variables, the cause and effect. Okay, so the effect, like the example is now, the defective panel is 1 variable, and you have 4 causes. So these are 4 different other variables that can be tested against the defective panel and to see whether or not there are any relationship between these variables. Okay, so in other words, is there any relationship between the method, the wrong tool used, with the defective panel? If there is, then that's when they can take the corrective action. If there was no relationship between the wrong tool used with the defective panel, then that part they will not take any action, and they'll try to test other variables, whether it's the man, the machine, or the material. So when they are testing the relationships, they will try to determine the correlation. So there are three possible correlations between the two variables. And again, later on, once you are doing your research, your ADS 555, so you'll be, or you might be using this approach as well. Okay, the correlation in your data analysis. Okay, so you have the first one, which is positive correlation, meaning that an increase in variable X is related to an increase in variable Y. So X increases, which means Y also increases. Negative correlation means an increase in variable X is related to the decrease in variable Y. Okay, so when X increases, Y decreases. So that's a negative correlation. And third one is there's no correlation. Okay, so the variables X and Y have no linear relationship. Okay, meaning that there's no relationship between the two variables. Okay, so this is the three correlations that will be determined by the scatter diagram. Okay, so you have these illustrations to show the examples of the different correlations. Right, so you have a positive and a linear correlation. So again, positive correlation meaning that increase in X means increase in, or results in increase in Y. And the distribution of the variables is roughly equal. That's why you have that linear or straight line. It's slanted to the right. And the negative correlation means that increase in variable X relates to decrease in variable Y. And like the first example, for this one also is linear, meaning the distribution or the changes or the relationship is equal for each changes in the variable. That's why you also have that straight line slanted to the left. And then you have the negative non-linear. So again, negative, increase X means decrease in Y, but the distribution is not as equal or even. Okay, and that's why you have that curved line. And same thing applies to a positive non-linear as well. So the curved line is going in the other direction. And for the third possibility, the no correlation, meaning no relationship between variable X and variable Y. So the distribution of the values will be scattered. That's why it's called scatter diagram. Okay, so the points indicate it's not all linear. Okay, it's all distributed unevenly. All right, so this is the different correlations that will be determined by or to determine the relationship between the two variables. All right. Okay, so we'll just take a second and final break, and then we'll come back. We'll go into the remaining tools, okay, the Kaizen and also the benchmarking. Okay, we'll continue after this break. All right, so let's go into the remaining two tools for quality control and improvement. So next one is Kaizen. Okay, so the definition of Kaizen, which is a combination of two words, okay, Kai for change and Zen, change for the better. So it is a gradual and orderly, continuous improvement. A gradual, a slow um, process, and orderly, meaning it is something that is uh, organized. A gradual and organized, continuous improvement. Okay? And this is a concept that has been adopted by companies all across the world. And this effort of continuous improvement can be applied to all areas of a business or a company, and not just limited to the improvement of the product or service. There can be improvements in the cost, in terms of meeting delivery schedules, product development, anything within a business. So for a successful Kaizen program, uh, it has needs these three things: operating practices, new improvement opportunities. So like the just in time, right? So there's no explanation. So if you can try to look up, just in time. So these are the operating practices that are in line with the Kaizen approach. Uh, Total involvement, meaning everyone in the company or organization will be involved in the continuous improvement process, from the top management, the mid-level management, supervisors, head of departments, employees, everyone. And training, where this involves the self-development programs or the self-improvement programs that teach problem-solving techniques and small group activities. Okay, so you have the training process is not just to enhance your skills, but also to enhance your ability to solve problems, okay, by studying different approaches or techniques to solve problems, and also training in or enhancing the self through these small group activities, okay, by encouraging teamwork, okay, by brainstorming, cooperating with each other to improve the quality of the company. So the Kaizen implementation tools. So this involves the checklist. Okay, so the first thing you need to have is a checklist, which includes the different areas that will be used for the continuous improvement. Okay, the personnel, meaning the employees or everyone involved in the process. Okay, the work procedures, equipment, tools, work techniques, everything will be included in the checklist. And then you have the Kaizen 5-step plan, which I think we all know already, which is the 5S. Right, it's very common anywhere, and still being implemented until now. So this 5S is to create that culture of waste reduction and minimization. So part of the process of continuous improvement is to establish this organizational culture of reducing waste, meaning to be more efficient, and also minimization, okay, to try to use as little resource as possible to achieve or to complete any task. Okay, so this is the initial or the main focus of the 5S. And the 5S steps are to be implemented over time, usually from 6 months to 2 years, and is to be implemented sequentially, meaning one after the other. So the company must first focus on implementing the first S, and the second all the way to the final S. Right? So we all know, I think, the 5S, what they stand for. So the first one is meaning to straighten up. In other words, the first S focuses on organizing, the different elements of the company and throwing away all the waste, or throwing away anything that is not used in the company. The organization must be the first focus of this 5S. Organize. So any paperwork or documents, you organize them into files and you categorize them. That's organizing. And throwing away, meaning any paperwork which is no longer used, so make sure you dispose of it. Whether you just throw it in a rubbish bin, or you use the paper shredder if it's a confidential document. Anything that is not used, get rid of it. And the second S is to put things in order. You organize the workplace. You arrange everything neatly, from the files, the folders, even to the desks and chairs. Everything has to be arranged neatly. Put things in order. So any files, they should not be left on the desk. After it's been used, then you place it back on the shelf. That is putting things in order. Even as simple things as stationery, pencils or pens or staplers, whatever it is, once it has been used, has to be returned or placed back in its proper original position. So that's the second S. And then once that has been done, then they move on to the third S, which refers to cleaning up. It always make sure the workplace or the company in general is always clean. And that's not just the responsibility of the cleaners. That is the responsibility of everyone, even from the top management, has to take on that responsibility for the cleanup. So any trash or any documents which are lying around, any rubbish that is in the workplace, get rid of it, throw it away, and make sure everything is cleaned up as well. Any desks or any equipment which has any what do you call ada kesan comot ke apa ke, ada kesan kotor, clean it. Everything has to be clean. And then the fourth S is about personal cleanliness. So it's not just about the cleanliness of the workplace, right? Not just the cleanliness of the equipment and the machines and so on. It's also about the personal hygiene and the personal overall cleanliness, even in terms of the appearance of the employees or anyone working in the company. From the grooming, the hairstyle, the clothing, everything has to be clean and neat. That is also part of the fourth S. And the fifth S is discipline. Meaning that the other four S's are not just a one-off practice. So you have to instill a sense of discipline within every member of the organization, that they need to continue to implement these steps. So even though they have already completed all the categorizing of the documents, the filing, they place everything in the cabinet, they still need to keep doing that for any other documents that arrive, any new documents. So they have to continue to file them, categorize them. Anything that has been used, return it back to the proper place. So this requires discipline among the organization. Okay, and then the next one is the 5W and 1H, okay, which refers to the who, what, where, when, why, and the how. So when it comes to the Kaizen, they have to identify who is doing or who should be doing this particular task for the continuous improvement. So there have to be a sense of responsibility and as well as empowerment. You give everyone a role in the company when it comes to the continuous improvement. Okay, what is being done, okay, what should be done, and all those things, where it's being done, and so on. Okay, that should be determined by the company. And then the 5M checklist, okay, the man, machine, material, methods, and measurements, okay, must also be checked so that each of these elements can help with the continuous improvement. The man, the employees, and so on, the machines being used, the material being used by the company, the methods and the process, and how they measure performance, everything has to be checked. All right, so that's the Kaizen. And then you have the fifth tool, which is benchmarking, and I think this is also something familiar as well. Right, so even companies now, until now, even UiTM, they do all this benchmarking exercise or practice. So basically, benchmarking is you measure the performance of your own company against the performance of the companies that are the best in class, meaning the top quality or the top performing companies. Okay, so in other words, you're comparing between your company and the other company which is of better quality. And then you try to identify now what are the things they are doing which enables them to reach that level of quality. So that's basically what benchmarking is about. Okay, so another concept associated with benchmarking is best practices, amalan terbaik. So best practices are any practices with regards to technology, human resource, which are recognized by the customers or the consumer base or the experts of the industry. So they are the ones who recognize. So these are the practices which are the best to be applied in a company. So to achieve that quality, they will need to incorporate these best practices. And that's how benchmarking works. So when your company, for example, you observe the other company that is of top quality, you observe what are the best practices that they implement. And then you try to apply that in your own organization. Okay, so the benchmarking helps to identify the performance gaps, okay, the gap between your company and the other company of higher quality, and it is a process of continuous learning. So you are constantly learning because you are going to compare yourself with other companies. Even though you have achieved some level of quality, you still need to learn by looking at other companies that might be of even higher quality than you have achieved, so that you can learn from them and you can try to improve yourself until your company reaches that same level of quality. So it's a process of continuous learning. So you have these two types of benchmarking, competitive and process. So the competitive is where you compare directly with your rivals or your competitors in the same industry. If you are producing smartphones, then you also compare yourself with other companies that are producing smartphones. So you compare your products with their products, your processes with their processes, your business performance with their business performance, and see, if they are better in certain parts, then you try to determine what they are doing that makes them better in, for example, the business performance. And then you try to apply that to your own company. And then process benchmarking, so focus on the key work process. Okay, you identify the most effective practices in companies that are in the same function as you. Okay, you still focus on companies that are in the same business or the same uh, that has the same function as your company, but these are companies of higher quality, and you look at their work process and you try to identify the best practices they are doing and you apply that in your company. But of course, there are some barriers to benchmarking. Lack of motivation to adopt the best practice, whether it's the employees or even the management themselves. So even though they do the benchmarking, they identify the best practices of the other company, but they might lack that motivation. Okay, macam tak nak aja, nak laksanakan amalan terbaik dalam syarikat mereka sendiri. Okay, so they need some kind of motivation, something to kickstart the practice or the implementation of the best practice. So that can be a barrier if there's no motivation. And then inadequate information about how to adapt the best practice and make it work. So they might observe the best practices of another company, but they might not have enough information in terms of how to adapt the best practices into their own company. Okay. So in other words, tak cukup maklumat dari segi bagaimana untuk melaksanakan amalan terbaik. So if they have no information or not enough information, then they cannot implement the best practice. And thirdly, lack of absorptive capacity, the resources and skills to make and manage the change. Okay, so the lack of or the lack of ability to absorb, meaning to adapt to the changes made based on the benchmarking. So mungkin dilaksanakan amalan terbaik, tapi pekerja mungkin lambat nak terima amalan yang baru, right? And you might lack the resources. Okay? So the other companies, they might have more resources. That's why they can implement all those best practices that makes them quality companies. But your company might lack the resources, so therefore you cannot apply the same best practices or processes. And you lack the skills. Okay? You might lack the training to apply those best practices. And these are some of the barriers, okay, to apply the benchmarking. Okay, and the last one is this additional point or topic from this chapter, which is engaging the workforce in process improvement. Okay, so to engage the employees in terms of improving the process, improving the quality, requires skills, especially on the part of the management. So you need technical skills, you need to have a shared vision, and behavioral skills. So technical skills, you need to know in terms of what are the tools to use, how to use the tools, and so on. Shared vision, you need to get your employees to share your same vision to improve the quality. If your employees don't share the same vision, then it'll be difficult to improve the quality. And behavioral skills, meaning your interpersonal skills, your communication skills, how you communicate to your employees, that they need to work together to improve the quality of their company. So these are things which are required, okay, to encourage or to motivate the workforce to be part of the improvement process. And then the skills that are needed by the team leaders, whether it's the management or the leaders of the different teams in the company involved in the continuous improvement. So they need to have all these skills, okay, the management skills, the conflict resolution. Okay, you might have members who are have conflicting views or ideas. So if you, as a leader, you need to be able to manage the different ideas from your members. Okay, leadership skills, okay, communication skills, and so on. All these things are required, okay, for the leaders of a team in the company. And as a member of a team that's involved in the process improvement, then they need to have the skills of effective meetings, right? Meaning you have to make sure that you attend meetings, attend them on time, be participative, you contribute ideas to the meetings. That's a skill for team members. And shared decision making, meaning that you need to have an agreement when making decisions. You have to have a consensus when making decisions. Right? So the key idea is that, compared to the technical tools for gathering and analyzing data, the soft skills that involve people, such as the project management, the team facilitation, are more difficult to teach and learn. So what I'm saying is that, it's easy to learn and teach about creative problem solving, right? The fishbone diagram, the what else? The scatter diagram and so on. It's easy to learn. Okay, we can eventually learn and understand and apply. But when it comes to the human aspects of improving quality, it can be a bit more challenging. And that's why, as mentioned in the previous slide, they need these skills to be able to effectively get the human elements of the company, the management, the employees, everyone involved in the improvement process, so that they can eventually improve the quality of their products and services as well as the entire company. Okay, so we are done with chapter 8 in our syllabus. So if there are no questions, then we can stop at this point. So next week, we'll go into chapter 9, which is the TQM models, or total quality management model. So we still have 2 more chapters to go. Hopefully we can finish the syllabus. Okay, so
Yes.
yes.
It's okay. It's okay.
Okay. All right, then, so we'll end the class for today. So I'll see you all next week. Yes, stay safe. Have a nice day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.